I want to welcome everybody to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Experts series. Um, I've been doing this now since May of 2012. If any of you are new to the series, just know that everybody will have a recording link if you signed up, even if you're not here live, or even if you're here live and want to hear it again. And within a few weeks, these interviews are now part of the podcast series that you can listen to anywhere you listen to podcasts. I have a Substack, there'll be a YouTube, uh, the recording will be sent out, it will be posted, Apple, Spotify, any platform that you use. And you're welcome to share it with anybody that you think would be interested. With the new format of having Zoom, you'll see that it's posted for the rest of the year, all the speakers that I have, so you can sign up at any time. And if just go to my website and you'll see the different events. And I welcome you to sign up and be part of the series. And today I'm so delighted to have Sara Geber and Jay Zigmont with me. Many of you who've been with me since May of 2012 know Sara. She's been with us before, and her specialty is solo aging and has a wonderful book that she wrote about essential retirement planning for solo agers, a retirement and aging roadmap for single and childless adults. And I still reference, your book a lot. And Jay Zigmont is founder of Childfree Trust, and they've done a lot of collaboration together. I say they sort of are taking their show on the road, of really realizing, estate planning is important for everybody, and a lot of people put it off, but I think there are more challenges if you're a solo ager. So I really want us to both be able to focus on what the extra challenges are. I think a lot of people who are on the call are solo agers or know of solo agers. And, some people also who have children, but they're not around, have similar dilemmas of how to think about these things, but similar but different kind of dilemmas. So without further ado, I want to, kind of welcome Sara and Jay. And how did the two of you, let me just sort of ask that to start with, how did you find each other and sort of recognize the importance of focusing on, this idea of the challenges of estate planning for solo agers?
Sarah, I don't even know how we ended up the first time, but I have to give Sarah credit. So, for those that don't know, Sarah coined the term solo agers, what is it, 15 years ago plus? I don't know. It feels like a long time ago. And when I was getting into this child-free world of, life and financial planning, Sarah was it. Like, that's all you had and all you could find out there. And I bow down to that experience. And, Sarah's got a slightly different slant on the way she takes it than I do, but complementary.
Yeah, I think Jay and I ended up in the same meeting a few years ago. We have a group called Pros Working with Solo Agers, and that group now has, well, I guess if you added everybody that belongs, it's about 30 people. And usually when we have a meeting monthly, we have 10 or 12 people that log on if they are able. And we just discuss the various issues coming up for solo agers. And Jay was on one time and talked about what he was doing. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just can't even count the number of times people have said to me, well, I've tried to do an estate plan, but then the attorney always asks me to name people that are going to speak for me if I can't, or that are going to handle my finances. And I can't, I don't have anything to put down. I don't have anyone. And all of a sudden, here's Jay Zigmont who says, I have a fix for that. I have the answer for that. And I thought, hallelujah. And I finally found someone that I can refer people to that have that really has a terrific solution for solo agers. You'll hear soon that Jay defines his um, his population or his audience, if you will, a little differently than I do, because right now his solution uh, for fiduciaries for solo agers is people who don't have kids. And of course, as some of you remember, that was my first definition too for
Mm.
solo ager, was anyone who didn't have children, married or single. And then things morphed, and I got a lot of pushback from people who had kids who lived 6,000 miles away or who were estranged, and I expanded the definition, and now solo aging really takes in anyone who doesn't have or foresee having help and support as they get older.
Hmm. And that does seem like a more encompassing kind of definition. So have you I mean, do you still mostly now, Jay, yourself focus on um, Sarah's definition of solo aging, or how does your work differ?
Yeah, so the challenge is from an estate planning standpoint, the paperwork is different if you don't have kids at all versus you do have kids. So when
Mhm.
we launched Childfree Trust beginning of this year, it specifically is focusing on people who have no living biological or adopted children, mostly because of how that changes the paperwork. Over the
Mhm.
next 6 or 12 months, we'll end up encompassing a lot of the folks that Sarah's talking about, but there's some changes we need to make to get there.
Hmm. That is interesting to think, to think about that difference. Why is it, do you think, that people, I mean, estate planning is, well, let me ask the question. Why do you think people put off estate planning? What is it about it that, from your viewpoint? I mean, I have my own theory about it, but why do you think people sort of don't want to focus on it?
Sarah, you want to start?
No, you go. You go. This is yours.
All right. So Uh, there's a wide range from like, I just don't want to talk about death. Like, because everybody thinks estate planning is about dying. And it's not really about dying. It's about who makes decisions for you when you can't, which is both while you're alive and after you pass. And then Sarah and I had put out a white paper looking at this. We found that less than 20% of child-free people have a will in place. Turns out, by the way, nationwide is about 30%, so they're a little behind. And the number one reason was they just didn't have somebody's name to put down. That's what Sarah was talking about. Then we get into the real life stuff. So I talked to clients just this week, two different clients. One example was like, hey, I want to finish my paperwork, but I've moved so much, I don't know where I want to be buried. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, let's get the rest of the paperwork down and we can specify that later. And then I had somebody else was like, I'm just stuck. I don't know who to give my stuff to. And I'm like, once again, we need to get the power of attorneys in place, we need to get all the paperwork. Because if you don't have the paperwork, you run the risk of having a court appointed guardian or conservator, which nobody wants. And it's things like this, these little issues that are big to each person, that each one of these adds up to a lot of people not being prepared.
Do you have anything anything to add?
Yeah, I think that it's such a non-starter for solo agers when an attorney says, "Here, fill out this form," and they literally have nobody to. They've not talked to anyone about it. They've not kind of recruited anyone. And so, sadly, the most common response to that is, well, I'll just put it aside and worry about it another day.
Mm.
And then, another day comes and another day comes and another day comes. And ultimately, the inevitable crisis happens and they've done nothing and they have no preparation for being in the hospital or recovering from some serious surgery. They have no one that they've ever talked to about helping them.
Right.
And that's the saddest thing.
And I think that's universal. I mean, that's my sense that, I mean, you said it earlier, Jay, people don't want to think about mortality or death or crisis. And yet it really is all about living. And I mean, I always view it as an act of love, to have all of these things in place, an act of love for yourself, as well as, if there are, friends or other people in your family, so that at the time of crisis, you sort of, you know, people know what you want. But how do you,
Mhm.
So if somebody hasn't done anything yet, Jay, what what would you say, where should they start? What are the important things to think about? And then, I want you both to talk about the challenges of, how to think about what kind of person, you maybe want to turn to be, healthcare proxy or durable power of attorney or, all of those things. But if somebody hasn't done anything, where should they start, Jay? What are, like the first few steps?
Yep. So there's kind of two paths that I send people down. One is, if you know who you want to put as your power of attorney, you already know who that is. And by the way, one of the things I always remind people, if you're in a couple and not married, your partner has no legal rights until you have paperwork in place. So even if you're gonna have your partner or whatever else, you can go to websites like freewill.com. It's literally freewill.com. That's it. And get it done for free and you get it done in half an hour.
Hmm.
And the key is to get something in writing. It doesn't have to be perfect. Really, you should be updating your estate documents every 5 years anyway. So I'm like, get something done. Now, if you don't have somebody to appoint, well, that's where we can help you at Childfree Trust. At Childfree Trust, we serve as medical power attorney, financial power attorney, executor, and trustee for people who don't have
Hmm.
kids. So that is the service we have. So you have two
Hmm.
paths. So to Sarah's point about like you just get stuck because you don't have somebody's name, now you have an option. So that
Hmm.
excuse kind of disappears. What I tend to find kind of interesting is encouraging people to get their paperwork done. The number one way I found that works is to remind them who's going to take care of your pet when you're disabled.
Hmm.
Turns out 75% of child free people have pets. And that question of like, oh, you go to the hospital, who makes sure your dog is let out is a big one. It's actually
Hmm.
what I joke that if my wife and I are in the hospital together, she's gonna be more worried about the dog than me. But we all know that's kind of probably the truth. And like that actually can encourage people to get it done because if it's just for you, people just put it off. I had a client just recently, he went in for surgery and like he was doing his paperwork the day before the surgery. And I'm like, you're driving me crazy. Like, we got to get this done. Like, you're like the surgery's tomorrow morning. You got to go get this signed. And unfortunately, if you wait, it could just be too long. And it turns out the number one reason why people get their estate documents done is either they have kids or their first house. Well, if you don't have kids and if you're renting, people are like, well, I don't feel the push. And that's where Sarah and I very kindly and sometimes not as kindly give people a kick in the butt to say, just get something done.
Yeah. Yeah, get a start and that's usually the hardest part for people is just to get going.
So what sense you had said earlier, Sarah, that um and I'm hearing Jay offering an alternative, but when people, talk to you and they say, I don't even know what kind of person, who should I ask? How much should I tell? What should I do? I mean, what are the fears that you have been hearing from people that I guess maybe in some ways paralyze them? Um,
Yeah, people are um so independent, these so independent minded these days. And I think I have strong opinions on this, but I think we've indoctrinated people almost too much that they should be independent. And there's so much to be said for convincing people that they need to be interdependent. We don't, we're social animals and we don't, and in most cases, can't stand alone against everything that society throws at us these days. We need partners, we need a team, literally a team. And especially as we get older, we need to support one another. We need to make agreements with people around support and around service. I've recently had several friends that have had hip replacements and knee replacements and whatnot, and I've participated in their care circle. And it's a temporary thing, and then it's gone. But it does give you a taste of what life could be like if you got a more serious diagnosis. And we don't know just because it hasn't happened yet. and you're 80 or you're 76 or you're 85, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. And very honestly, statistics say that for around 70% of us, we will be needing care around us at some point in our lives. So, not having any plans for that to me is a little reckless. Um, so, how, I do get the question a lot. How do I find people to do this? How do I recruit people? And I always suggest that people start by looking at their family. And most all the people I talk to don't have children, or their children are somehow quite unavailable to them for one reason or another. And I say, so look a little further afield. Are there nieces or nephews that you've grown close to, that you would trust, and that you have a kind of a warm relationship with? And it's for in my case, in fact, it's a younger cousin who's about 15 years younger than me, who I've recruited to be part of my care team, at least part of the decision-making process. Now, I am married, and obviously my husband and I are going to be each other's first level of care and decision making. But a lot of people don't even have that. So recruiting someone to be that first point of contact for you is important. And if it's not a relative, then it may well be a good friend. And once again, I suggest to people, find a friend that's a little younger than you. Find someone in your life that maybe they were a student of yours, or maybe you were a mentor to somebody somewhere along the line. Those are good candidates for that kind of decision-making role in your life. It's funny, but it's very hard for people to wrap their mind around that. It's this whole independence thing. And I think we really need to start thinking more along the lines of interdependence. And do it for somebody else. Pay it forward. Find an older friend and say, do you have someone? I'd be willing to be that person for you. So you're having the experience of being on that end of things as well, which is a good experience.
I think that's so important. At the beginning of us coming together today, I saw that Betsy Worley's on the phone, and I remember years, and I mean, it was a long time ago when Betsy was with, I guess the name has changed now, but it was then called the Transition Network, and Betsy's doing other things, but there was that caring collaborative that developed then with that idea of people helping people and, creating, as you say, a team. But the hard part too is making sure that you talk to whoever it is you choose, if you finally have chosen somebody, about what's really important to you, and what your wishes are and how you define quality of life and all of those things. So I'm going to keep going back and forth with some of the questions, but Jay, it's so interesting to think that um, so you're saying you and your company can provide, if somebody can't, I guess, come up with a relative or a friend or something that you can provide these things. I mean, how do you get to know the person, or what questions do you ask? What kind of fees are involved if people, I guess, don't want to go the route of asking for help among friends, acquaintances, relatives, but prefer, I guess, having it be um, separate from that. Maybe people feel less vulnerable that way. Can you, talk us through what would happen if people contacted you?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of, and kind of the way I look at it is everybody deserves to have a professional in their team to make decisions for them when they can't. Now, that doesn't mean everybody can afford it. That's a different question because it is a matter of resources. And to Sarah's point, like my wife is my first person on my list. Childfree Trust is our backup. Well, the reality check is if something happens, my wife's going to be better off saying, Childfree Trust, just handle it so she can just be there to be my spouse. Because there is a point of the community being there to support you and separating out who makes the decisions. And part of this is also a safety net. So I had a colleague who's a healthcare advocate in California come with an example. And this client had gone to her niece, who she had like a kind of relationship with, but not really. And the niece is going to make the decisions for her. And in return for making the decisions, the niece gets everything that's in the will. Well, that actually sets up a conflict because now what's happening is the niece is canceling doctor's appointments because it's taking away money that she's going to get in the will. So you got to be careful on kind of how do you set up a support structure around you. And as somebody's notes in the chat, it is a big ask. If somebody's caring for you for long-term care, you're talking about 3.7 years for women on average, or the estate planning process, all that. It is a lot of work. So what we do instead in our system, and it's okay, whichever works for you. We can be the backup, we can be the first, whatever it might be is you come into our system, you create your estate documents. That's your will, your medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney. It's all the trust. It's like the specific documents. And there are some changes to the way documents are designed for people who don't have kids. So, for example, in our documents, we specifically say money goes for my care primarily. Anything left over goes to my beneficiaries, which kind of sounds like a no-brainer. But how the documents are set up will determine, like, hey, are they canceling the doctor's appointment because we got to make sure that more goes to the beneficiary. So we've set that up in the documents. And then we create what we call care documents, which is everything that matters to you. So I had somebody, I was on a podcast, and the way he said it was he was taking care of his mom. His mom's in her 90s. She's in a nursing home. And the nurse won't give her chips because, it's not on her diet. And he's like, look, it's not going to impact her health. I mean, like, seriously, she said at the end, give her damn chips. And his question was, who gets me my chips? And it's a great question. So that's what you outline in your care documents is what matters to you and how do we do that. Now, we're not literally going to show up to your bedside and give you your bag of chips. We're going to enable a care team to do this, which the ideal structure is you've done that beforehand. And that's where you can build out things like aging care managers and others to make sure what you want done is done. Now, at the same point, and because of where we're talking today, you also need to have a plan for how to pay for it. How are you going to pay for your long-term care? Got to remind everybody, Medicare does not pay for long-term care, and Medicaid only pays after you've run out of money. So it's more than just like getting the documents and name of the person, but it's like, how do you create an entire plan and care system around you? And to Sarah's point, you can't do it alone. You can hire people if that's what you want. You can engage a community if that's what you want, but you can't age alone.
Yeah.
I think that's,
I think Betsy put an interesting comment in the chat and a link to a women's connection kind of a model. And I just a reminder that the Caring Collaborative was out there. It's a good way to start becoming interdependent, is to put a collaborative like that together and talk about what your needs are and what your wishes are. Everything from like chips, like Jay suggested, to yeah, there's so many different things, music that you want to listen to.
yeah.
Those things are important. I can't help but think that the right combination might be the professional fiduciary paired with the circle of caring friends for solo agers. Then the caring friends don't have to be the ones to make the decisions, to contact the professional care providers. That can all be in the hands of the trust administrators. But the actual boots on the ground, hand holding, warm compresses on the forehead kind of thing is in the hands of people that you love.
I think that's would be such a lovely kind of combination to do it that way. And
Mhm.
it's getting people, though, really thinking as early as possible. And I always say it's as early as you can, and it's even if you haven't done anything, it's not too late to do it now. But it's so important
Mhm.
to do it while we're able to, because, the crises happen when suddenly you haven't done anything and you haven't made any decisions. I mean, I really learned that, I guess it's about 40 years ago now when my dad was sick and dying, and we sat down as a family, and I remember my brother did not want to talk about it. And I said, "Oh, this is really good. We need to talk about it." And it
Yeah.
really helped, sort of, making sure the documents were there and who was doing what and responsible for what. And it helped, when he died, and it helped, I was the healthcare proxy for my mom, and it helped me know really what she wanted and didn't. And it helped to not have to second guess. So I think that combination of, maybe getting all those documents set up, but deciding, not wanting to burden people, but wanting that team. And, Betsy did, put it down. What was called the transition network is now womensconnecting.org. And so, you can find out about this caring collaborative there. Um, do you find once people talk to you, Jay, that do you find that you're able to help them with the document part and then help facilitate some of what Sarah's talking about of, helping people really kind of think about who's on my team, who can I count on, who could I ask? Um,
Yeah, so let me give a great example of this. So this is a real life example that it's ongoing right now. So one of our clients, I'm going to call him Dan. He's in his 70s. He's got cancer, and he's a single guy, no kids. And his big concern was, hey, when I'm in the hospital, who's going to take care of my dog? Which is great, because he's kind of understood where he's at in his life and kind of where this is going. And we created his estate documents, worked it through. And one of the questions was, well, who gets your dog? Because we need to know that. Like, we need to know who to call. It turns out to be his neighbor. And how do we make sure his dog actually is cared for? There's something called a pet trust, so he has the money for it. And then, interestingly enough, that was Dan's big worries. Like his worries about like him and his funeral and all that, not really worried about that. But we got all that information. And then a couple weeks ago, actually might be a month ago now, got a call from the hospital because we become their 24/7 emergency contact. He had listed as a contact. The hospital says, hey, Dan's in for palliative care. We need a copy of the power of attorney. We faxed over a copy of the power of attorney, faxed over some of his medical information we had. And then just this week, we got another call. Hey, Dan's going into nursing care. We need to figure out the plan. He's still 100% with it, can make his own decisions, but we're in the loop. And what happens is we're often recommending, and Dan's a bit of a loner, so he hasn't built that network. So how do we build up that network around it? As we bring in people like aging care managers that can do that and be at the bedside, and you can build the team kind of artificially. Now, it would have been nice if he could have built that network beforehand, but that's just not his personality, and that's just not him. And I don't know that we were going to ever convince him to build that, but that's that balancing act. The key is you want to have a plan and have it figured out well in advance. So what tends to happen is when people work with us, we go, okay, well, who do we want to notify? And that's a good question. There's somebody else on the chat. Who do we not notify? Like, which is a great question too. Like, please don't tell this person when they call. Perfect, because you need to know what are the boundaries. What I find is that most people haven't actually thought it through, or what they say is, well, my family will know what to do when the moment happens. And I'm going to tell you right now, as a family member I've cared for my mother. She's been disabled since I was 16. She might think I know what she wants, but I want to know. Like when I say I want to know, I want it in writing, I want it down, I want to know what's going on because it's huge to go, oh, well, they'll just know. Not really. In a time of crisis, that's hard. I was a paramedic for years, and I remember a time I was at a patient's bedside. A gentleman's in his 70s, he's in cardiac arrest, and there's six family members around the bed fighting over whether we should do CPR or not. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Pause. We can't do this. Either he has paperwork that says what to do. He happened to be at end stage cancer and wanted not to have CPR. I need that paperwork. Or I, as the paramedic, have to make that choice. So the gift you can give the people around you is by having that paperwork in place. And so that people like me don't have to make the choice when, we're there, or even worse, have to go to the court to make that choice.
Is that so? How did you go from being, doing kind of the medical work to your child-free trust? Because it sounds like such a important transition that you went through. Um,
So I told you my mother has been disabled my whole life, and
yeah.
I've seen the inside of healthcare systems way too much. And I'm not going to pull back punches. The healthcare system's busted. I mean, it's broken in many different ways. And I said, all right, I want to try to help fix that. So I worked as a paramedic, and then I actually became a healthcare administrator. I got a PhD in adult learning. My work is really around how do we help people learn in the medical world. The problem is when you're in the healthcare world, you realize it's all about money. It's all about finance. It's not necessarily about patient outcomes. And I don't think I'm saying anything that people don't know in their heart, but like it's sad when you see that. And I kind of burnt out of healthcare because I was trying to do it for a different reason than they were. And I started, I've been doing coaching for years and all of the things. I was doing financial coaching, and I was studying to become a certified financial planner. And there's never once a mention in any of the financial literature about living a life without kids. It all
Mm.
assumes you do have kids or you will have kids. And my wife and I are child free, and the question was like, are we just weird? Is it just us? And it turns out, nope, it's 25% of the US and growing, but it's completely overlooked. So I started Child Free Wealth and serving people as financial planner. And the number one question I got, which is the same one Sarah had been working on for years, she gets credit for way beyond me, was who makes these decisions when I can't? And I went out, talked to everybody, just like Sarah did. Like we probably talked to the same people over the years. I'm like, can you do this for people? Can you? And nobody would do it. And I was like, well, that's a big problem. So I spent about 4 years creating a structure for Child Free Trust before we could even launch it, because we had to work with banking administrators and trust companies and others to get this done because nobody's ever done it. Well, that's a huge issue. So when I get up each morning, I think of the 15 million plus child free people of the age of 55 and who's going to make the decision for when they can't. Because I've been on the other side of the healthcare world, I've been on the financial world, and I know it's broken. And I'm just trying to fix this small piece.
Fascinating. There's a question here um, for you, Jay. What are the qualifications and characteristics of the people who work, I guess, within the child-free trust?
Yeah. So the people that are actually making the decisions are what's called a trust administrator. And these are people that are appointed by the trust company and approved by banking administrators to make decisions. Most of them come with a JD background or banking background. Because what happens is trust companies have been doing this and making decisions for people forever. The example, and this group will get it. I use this example in a course and somebody didn't get it. If you remember Beverly Hillbillies,
Mhm.
Granny's money was managed by the bank manager. Like that's a trust company structure. It's been around for hundreds of years, and we're using that structure. The difference is you don't normally get access to that unless you have millions and millions of dollars. Minimum fees for trust companies are somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000 a year. So we had to go out and create a new structure using that existing structure to do it. And the bonus there is there's a lot of checks and balances. They are legal fiduciaries. They're required to put your interest ahead of their own. They're overseen by bank administrators. So you've got those people. Now, they're not going to be at the bedside making the decisions. That's why we use a care team like aging care managers and others to be specialists. I'm not going to go to your house and literally let your dog out. I'm going to call your pet sitter. And by the way, follow your pet sitter's advice around how do we, actually provide long-term care for your dog. These are the types of things that you still need a support structure around.
You still, back to Sarah's point, this learning to ask for help, the viewing life as interconnected and interdependent, and how hard it is because we've just been brainwashed into thinking, independence, independence. But it does, it's that getting in touch with intentional living and that vulnerability is okay. And that, there is a pay it forward, as you were saying before. I'm just sort of thinking how it kind of plays out in relation to it. There was a question earlier, I was just sort of scrolling through that, Does it vary state to state, Jay? And like, where are you based? And what happens if somebody's, say, in Massachusetts and you're, I don't know, are you in California or where are you?
Yeah, I'm actually out of Nashville. The
Oh,
trust
Nashville.
company we work with is out of Alabama. We
Oh,
have people all over the country. What happens is we had to build a system that works across the country. So if you are in California or Arizona, there is something called a professional fiduciary that can do this for you. California has the best system I found. It's actually licensure. It's awesome. But that only works in California. So we had to figure out a way to do it across all the states. And it turns out all of the estate documents are different for each state, in particular around the medical power of attorney. We hired a team of legal interns for a summer just to go through every state's legal things and like look at individual. So, for example, one of the ones that drives me crazy is in Florida, you can appoint somebody to be your executor, but they have to have a physical address in Florida. Why? I don't know. This is because what their law says. So what we've done is we've set up a structure so that it can work across the country. And when you move, it moves with you. So for example, you move another state, we have to get to a new set of documents, they're signed, that's all included. So we had to build we have a 24/7 call center, emergency response, and then using that trust support structure, we can do that. And if needed, in for example, like Florida, we may have to delegate to somebody locally to do that, but we still oversee it. It's a really, really complex system that is so antiquated. The actual estate planning system in the U.S. is based off of England rules from the 1500s, and it really hasn't been updated since. There's only 7 states in the country you can sign your will electronically. You can buy a house electronically, but you can't sign a will. I don't know why.
interesting. I was thinking at the beginning we were defining solo aging. It may be helpful if you could define what these different vehicles are. I don't want to make the assumption that people on the call know, what's involved in being healthcare proxy or what's involved in power of attorney. It probably would be helpful to, if you don't mind, sort of explain the terms.
Yeah, that works. And I will tell you, each state has some slightly different terms around this, so I'm going to make them generic. The bottom line is who makes decisions for you while you're alive and incapacitated, and who makes decisions for you after you pass. So the people that make decisions for you while you're alive are your medical power attorney and financial power attorney. That is somebody you're saying, make my financial decisions for me and make my medical decisions for me. And those can be different people. So for some folks that have family, like, hey, I trust my brother with my medical decisions. I trust my sister with my financial decisions. That's fine. But that you have to have a piece of paper signed. You'll see that medical power attorney called a healthcare directive. Some states will call it, advanced directives, things like that. That includes the things like, do you want CPR? Do you want them to pull the plug? You want all the machines? That all those choices go into that medical power of attorney. Then you have, after you pass, you have what's called an executor. That's the one take care of your estate, and or a trustee. Now, the bonus is the trustee can actually handle things while you're alive and after you pass. And the trustee tends to have a little more power because one of the problems we have is that, in particular, like with financial power of attorney, all banks don't accept the same financial power of attorney document. What Chase accepts and what Bank of America accepts are different things. It can be a little bit tricky, and a trustee can get around that. But really, all you need to think about is who's going to make decisions for me while I'm alive and after I pass. Now, the problem is if you don't appoint somebody, you get a court-appointed guardian or conservator. Because if you don't make an estate plan, the state has one for you. They have who makes decisions for you when you can't. And they will go to your next of kin, possibly. So, like somebody asked the question, how do I prevent my brother from being in the middle list that I don't talk to? Well, the state would say in that case, your brother gets the say because they have their default plan in what they're called conservatorships or guardianships. There's slight variations state by state, but that's really somebody that handles your personal being, which includes your medical part, and the other is your financial. The way it works, though, is when somebody goes to court, you've lost all power. That is somebody stepping in and taking it over, and they may or may not know you. So if they can't find a next of kin, they'll appoint a court-appointed guardian conservator, which is just a local attorney or social worker or others to do those roles. And that's somebody who doesn't know you. So if I go back to Dan's example, if he didn't have his paperwork in place, they would get a court-appointed guardian to make decisions for him. But frankly, that court-appointed guardian might take a couple of weeks to get in place and wouldn't know about the dog, and unfortunately, the dog wouldn't make it. This is the
Mm.
problem. The system has big holes in it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think if there are other, I think that was helpful to explain those things. There is one question is, do you happen to know what's similar or different in Canada? Uh,
Yeah, I've had some requests for this. I don't. There's not a child-free trust in Canada yet. There are. There's a public trust component in Canada that does a little bit better structure around this. It's more on the medical side. I don't. I'm blanking on the term, the specific one. But in Canada, there are similar paperwork. It's just you have to work through. Same with other countries. There's actually the only country I found that does a decent job at this is actually Australia. Has a really good public trust, but it takes you 2 years to get in. So, like, there's pluses and minuses.
I know that there's another comment here from Jackie that like in Massachusetts, just thinking about the documents, it's called the MOLST, which is the Massachusetts, plan, and it really is important to have it on your refrigerator because what I'm told is if the emergency, an ambulance comes or something, the first place they look is on the refrigerator. And those documents, I mean, you're so right. I mean, I even think of a friend of mine who, was in visiting Florida and she forgot to take her documents with her. And her husband had a cardiac issue and he did not want resuscitation because he had a lot of other medical stuff. But because she didn't have the documents with her, they tried to resuscitate him. And so it ended up being a really painful death rather than what he had wanted. I mean, not we cannot control everything. So, having those documents and taking care of them is so important. But other things, so Sarah, what, since you've heard this before and all, and thinking about, yourself as a solo ager too, what have you found, are really important things that have helped you and your husband move ahead in, making some of these decisions and getting your documents in place?
Yeah, we are lucky to live in California, where we
Mm.
do have the professional fiduciaries, and we have professional fiduciary involved in our future, whatever that may bring. Um, it's one of the key considerations for solo agers, in my opinion, is where are you going to live? And a your living environment can be very supportive or very not supportive of the things that you'd like to have in your life as you get older, and especially as a solo ager. So, where you have the opportunity to join a village network, that can be a very important component and allow you to stay in your home longer if that's what you choose. Having the support system around you that you develop over time as a solo ager is an important function. I Being so immersed in this, as you can imagine, I have Google alerts for every news article that comes around for things about where people are going to live and older life and solo agers, which people are actually talking about and using the term now. So
Mhm.
it makes me feel like it's all over the news now. Well, it's all over my news, but I read about the whole idea of home sharing becoming much more popular, especially for women. But there's no reason why that can't be the case for men as well, um, either in a co-ed situation or in men only or women only. But that's it, financially, that can be the most viable plan for people to get older with support, is to live with others. Sometimes it's living with people your own age. Sometimes it's inviting a younger person who's um, in grad school or they have their first job and they're looking for a place to live where they can actually save some money, and you give them reduced rent in exchange for help around the house and companionship. So. The only thing that I shouldn't say opposed to, but I try and talk people out of the idea of trying to age solo ager on their own in their own home for the foreseeable future. It's to me, it's just asking for trouble. That eventually a crisis is going to come. You are going to have a health event. Um, the percentage of people that go out and have a nice dinner and come home and watch a great show on TV and go to bed and don't wake up, it's really small. It's not, it's what you hope might happen someday when you're 95 or however long you want to live. But it's unlikely. The more likely scenario is you're going to need some help and some support at some point in your life. So there's lots of alternatives out there for people to live in a more congregate setting, including co-housing and all of the traditional senior living options that are out there today. So I really have a strong bias toward where you live being one of, if not the most important decision you make as a solo ager.
Thanks. I think that's really important to highlight that part. But I want to shift back now to you, Jay, and well, just even comment on some of the things in chat because I'm not sure everybody's seen the chat that um the question was about legal staff in house, and you had said that you have a network of lawyers across the country because things are different state by state. So I just wanted to comment on that. Beneficiaries, can you talk about kind of it just seems like that's an important consideration, I guess, too. And how does that work? And how often should people update beneficiaries and estate plans and wills? And when are times when wills have to change? I know it's a lot of questions all at once, but you can handle it.
Yeah, and before I dig into that, so Sarah and I and Melissa from my team are doing a series with ARP Senior Planet over the next few
Oh,
weeks, and the first one is actually tomorrow. So you
oh,
want to dig in deep to some of these topics, come join us over there. On the beneficiaries question, a lot of folks are kind of stuck on like who gets my stuff and what do I have to do with it? And one of my favorite is if you ask your family what to do with your stuff, they all have an answer. And by the way, it's probably going to them or your nieces and nephews or whatever else it may be. But the truth is, you can just do whatever you want with your stuff. Like that's up to you. It turns out that child-free people give it about 3 times the rate of people with kids, just because they don't have a default choice of who gets it. My answer is always, if you want to make an impact on your family or charities, the better time to give it is while you're alive. The way they say it is give with a warm hand, not a cold hand. You get the tax benefits while it is, and you get to see the benefits there. You need to update your beneficiaries whenever your purpose changes. So, for example, in our documents, we always have kind of like, all right, I want to give X amount of money to this. Well, I don't want to have my dogs get this or whatever else. And that's going to change over time. Even when you give to charities, like, I like this cause now, 5 years from now, I might not. So I tend to tell people every 5 years, you want to do a little bit of updating and just go, do I still agree with where this is going? But the key is, I don't want you to get stuck on getting it right. You can change it at any time. The only thing you have to do is re-sign the form. So don't get stuck on like, well, I mean, I have somebody who's trying to figure out where all his money goes, and he's like researching every charity in the world. I swear, like he's looking at all their tax, and he's doing the right research. But I'm like, you have nothing on paper. You got to get one down now, and then you can update it. Like, don't try to make it perfect the first time. Make it part of a living document.
so if people want to be in touch with you, I mean, do how does the consultation work for somebody to find out if the services you have are something that would be helpful for them that they can afford, or what would be involved? How would they reach you or begin the
Yep.
process?
So we have 2 options. We have a company called Childfree Wealth that does the financial planning side, and Childfree Trust does the estate work. You can go to either website and get to know either. We have what we call a Childfree Wealth Checkup. It's $250, and we look at everything top to bottom, all your finances, your estate plan, everything, and give you a professional look at it. It gives you kind of an action plan. Here's where I have holes. Here's where I need to go, and it gives us the opportunity to figure out kind of like where are those opportunities? Where should I get professional help versus not? And what happens is most people do that, they try it out, and they're like, oh, I never thought of this, and this. And where do I go? And then we can figure out in our system, you can either kind of do it yourself. So you can go into the tech and just do it yourself, or you can work with a financial planner. We'll walk you through the entire process. If you have an existing financial planner, they can walk you through. We've tried to make it as easy as possible. Like our goal is that you can go to the website at childfreetrust.com, watch one of our webinars, watch one of the videos we've done, or read all about us. Go sign up in the system, get your paperwork done in 30 minutes, and be done. Now, that means you have to know the answers to the questions and what you want to do with your stuff. But if you do, we're trying to make it as easy as possible.
So I think, and you put your links, I think,
Yep.
In the chat thing. There's a comment here that, and I think it's relevant to what you were talking about, Sarah, that, a lot of the CCRCs, are really, really expensive and not everybody can afford them. And I think it's part of why I appreciated what you were saying too about the home sharing and different alternatives. Can you speak a little to that? Um, the where to
Well,
live and the dilemma of the costs.
are you asking for Jay
No, I was
more on
asking.
that? Because
Oh,
I've kind of talked about it.
okay.
Um,
So maybe Jay
I
can.
don't have
Yeah.
too much more to add to what I've said.
Okay.
It's a do-it-yourself world out there.
Yeah.
Um, and if you don't want or can't live in a traditional senior living community, then it's then you'll need to put something together for yourself. Again, villages are a wonderful way to extend your time at home because they provide so many opportunities
Mhm.
for services and socialization and all of that. But it's not the end
Yeah.
game. It's not for
Right.
the end game. So there's still that to consider.
Yeah, and
Jay?
unfortunately, Sarah and I often get the same question. We were at dinner once, and I asked her kind of, "What's your answer?" Which is like, "Okay, if you're broke, what do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't really
Uh,
have a great answer. There are state services that will help you, but they're first come, first serve. They're very limited. You have limited options if you do have limited money. It just is. It's expensive to age. It's about $125,000 a year on average per year for skilled nursing. All right. Not everybody's going to need skilled nursing, but that just gives you an idea what it costs. In-home care is going to be some fraction of that, assisted living, CCRCs, they're all expensive. But I will tell you that if you've done well across your life, you can get really nice care. I'm a big fan of active aging communities where they have like these apartment complexes that, they have like concierge there and transportation and food and all that, where you get a lot of support and a community, but they're not cheap. It just isn't. And I'm very worried. Medicaid does pay for care, but you don't always the same level of care. And there's been cuts to Medicaid. So we need to make sure your money is going to the right place for your care. And finding alternatives works. So I had somebody recently, she was looking at this for her mother, and she was going to move to Costa Rica for her long-term care. And what their version of a CCRC was about a third of the cost of the US for about the same care.
yeah.
There are options, but there are no cheap options. Like it just doesn't exist.
Yeah. I've often told people, and it's in my book, a whole section on moving abroad because yeah, same situation. We just throw up our hands and go, I don't know. And I
Mhm.
have people that come up to me after my talks that for 15 years now that have said, I don't have any money. What do I do? And I have no good answers for them. However, there are good answers elsewhere in the world.
Yeah.
And if you are still, I don't know, I would say young enough, but still active
Healthy.
enough and can do things on your own physically and mentally, if you still have the capacity to consider moving to a country where these things are either much less expensive or provided through the government, as you read about everywhere, people are doing it all the time. They're moving to Portugal and they're moving to Thailand and whatnot. If it were me, I think my choice would be something a little closer. I'd move down south of the border. I'd move down to one of the
Mm,
wonderful communities in Mexico, Costa
mm,
Rica, and Panama, other countries where all these horrendously expensive things are just affordable. So, but if you're 80 and that time has probably passed you by, my
mm,
husband and I have some relatives who's actually an older cousin of his. They are in their early 80s, and their daughter has lived in Italy for 25 years, and
mm,
they've finally decided to make the move. And
mm,
they did it. They're there and they're enjoying life in Italy, but it was a horrendously um, taxing move on their part at their age.
mm.
So,
Yeah, yeah, good point. Jay, any
Yeah,
thoughts on that? Yeah.
I think that, I like the international moves, and I've done I had somebody actually, speaking of Thailand, they were looking at the Thailand, and like they gave me back quotes of what it's going to cost. And I'm like, did you quote the right thing? Like, is this real? Because it was that much cheaper. And then we did the
yeah.
research and no, it's real. I was like,
Mm,
oh, like, but I will encourage you, not only about age, but also that's going to change just about everything about your financial plan, which is where working with a financial planner to understand what's going to happen to your taxes, your finances, all that become interesting. So, for example,
mm,
one of the tricks people don't see is while in the US you might have a Roth IRA, which is not taxed. Well, when you go to another country, that's taxed. So
mm,
there
Mhm.
are other financial considerations. And the
Hmm.
bottom line is, again, you need support and you need a team. If Sarah and I sound like a broken record, it's because we kind of are. And I would hope, I've had some folks go, well, I'm hoping that, with all the boomers aging, that they'll change the aging world and they'll change long-term care. And then I'm like, yeah, you go ahead, keep hoping. Like, I, I just, I just can't see it as real.
Yeah. So I see, I mean, there are all kinds of nice comments in the chat about different places, opportunities. Belize speaks English, is English speaking, I mean, and just the different costs of, different locations and all. But I also see that, it's a little, we're at the top of the hour and a little after. So I sort of wondered if for each of you, a question, if there were like three things that each of you would like to leave people with, three kind of takeaways from the conversation that you would hope that people would remember and maybe think of. What would be, it doesn't have to be three, but one to three or four or whatever. What are some takeaways that you each would like people to think about as we end up the conversation for today, the interview for today? Um, Sarah, do you want to start?
Okay. I would say take action soon if you haven't done it at all. If it sounds interesting to you to potentially consider moving abroad, start looking at that now. There's an organization called International Living. They may still put out a magazine. I know they still have a website. They're very active in helping people make that decision. But again, my big hot button is where you're going to live. So think hard about your yourself at 95 and where you see yourself living. It's very hard for people to put themselves in their 90 or 95 or 100-year-old body. It's just really hard. We think about how we are now. I think, well, I'm just going to keep on being this same person, doing the same things. And uh, I can assure you that's not going to be the case. You're
Mm,
going to be different in ways that you can't predict. So, yeah, think about where you're going to live.
thanks. Jay?
So if I sum it all up, when I talk to clients, I talk to folks on the younger side. I say you're not ready to retire until you have a plan in place for long-term care. Now, if you're
Mm,
already retired, then we got to get it done. And that plan for long-term care includes both how do you pay for it and who makes the decisions. And you have to have a plan. If you don't, the government does one for you, and nobody wants that. So if nothing else, if there's nothing you do except, you've listened to us for an hour and the answer is you go get some piece of paperwork done for you, awesome. You've made a step. Then we have to come back and fill out your care plan and how we do it and how we build the community, right? It's the right place, everything Sarah's talking about. But it's a must. It is not something you can put off till later because too many people. I had a client at mid 50s who was a lawyer, had a great business, had a stroke, and next thing you know, he can't function. And he didn't have stuff in place. You don't want to be there. People think about it as like end of life and who gets my stuff. Let's be real. Once you're dead, you don't care as much about where your stuff goes. It's just not the priority. But you need to do it while you're alive to make sure you're caring for yourself, your loved ones, your animals, and others, and not put it off. Nobody wants to do it. Like this is not like you wake up and like, yay, I want to do my estate planning, but you have to.
So let me ask one other question to each of you, if it's okay with you. Um, so for each of you, what has been the impact for each of you of doing your estate planning?
Peace of mind.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I'm on the I'm a little younger than Sarah, and I think some of my peers like don't even bother getting that paperwork done. What I
Mm.
know is that if anything happens to me or my wife, we're each taken care of, which is that peace of mind Sarah's getting to. Like it just works. And I also know that one of us will be a solo ager at some point, just kind of the way the statistics go, and that person will still be okay also.
Great.
Mhm.
Thank you both so much for being here. And I know that when the recording goes out, the links and everything that are there, just share again, would you, Jay, that you're doing this thing with AARP, that is it for a number of sessions and in more depth? I mean, maybe that would be a good resource to leave people with too.
Yeah, so we're doing this with AARP Senior Planet. Tomorrow I'm going into specifics around that long-term care, how do you pay for it, and some more on the estate planning side. Sarah's got one. Melissa, also from our team, who's a doctor of social worker, does a lot of work on, cognitive decline, all that. We're doing a series of sessions each individually, and then we're coming together as a group to do a Q&A. So I love what Senior Planet is doing a lot of work, and AARP also is doing a lot of work with solo agers, and Sarah's doing she had just did an article in the Bulletin, a few other things. Like there's a lot of good stuff coming out of AERP on solo agers.
Mm, thanks. So, did you want to, anything you wanted? When is your talk, Sarah? Do you know which week or
Yes, mine's on August 5th.
August 5th? Okay.
Mm.
All right. Great. Well, thank you both. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And by all means, you'll get a recording of this. You can share it with whomever you want. Jay and Sarah, you'll have a recording too. If it's help, you can share it in whatever way it would be helpful too. And I'm glad people know how to, contact you, Jay. And what if people want to learn more of what you're doing, Sarah? What's the way to be in touch with you?
You can certainly find me on my website, which is simply myname.com, sarazeffgeber.com. Um, I'm currently writing another book. So I normally do a lot of speaking at often at senior living communities, sometimes just for the public at large. So my life is writing and speaking. That's about it. I'm the sort of the flag bearer for solo aging, and people come to me when they want to write articles about it or talk about it, and that's fine. I'm always happy to give interviews, but I'm out there still carrying the flag. Probably will be for the rest of my life.
What's your new book? I mean, what aspect of solo aging will your new book be?
Well, it's actually going to be kind of a updated primer on solo aging, but this one is for AARP. They've actually come to me and asked me to write. Now they have a series of books that they do with Wiley Publishing called in the Dummies series.
Oh, yeah.
AARP has a lot of those dummies books,
Right.
Finance Over 50 for Dummies, etc. Well, I'm writing Solo Aging for Dummies.
Ah, well,
It'll
that's
be out
great.
next spring.
Oh, wonderful. Well, maybe when it comes out, you'll come back and be
Sure,
part of my interview series. We'll get you
sure,
scheduled
be
for next
happy to.
spring. Okay. Well, thank you, Jay. And you have a book in the back there. Is that something? Do you have a book too?
Yep.
Oh,
So I have the
oh,
Child Free Guide to Life and Money, which dives into all of this. I'll throw it.
Child-Free Guide to Life and Money.
Yep, and I'll
Okay.
throw it in the chat.
Okay, great. And you've already put in how people put in the chat how people can
Yep.
be in contact with you. Great. All right. I have to check that book out too. Well, thank you, both of you, very much. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I think it was a really helpful. I just was reading some of the comments of people and just very helpful, getting this on the radar and helping people really think about this challenging and important area. And as I say, I
Thank you,
think estate
Dori.
planning anyway is hard, but I think it's particularly hard if you don't, you know, you don't really know who's on your team yet. So,
Yeah.
so thank you.
Yeah.
Take
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
care.
having
Dori, for
us.
having us on.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.